This video is brought to you by Squarespace. When it comes to websites, online stores, etc., there's no place to build a beautiful online presence like Squarespace. Hey everyone, festival fan here. I recently went to TIFF. No, not Tiffany, you bozo. I went to the Toronto International Film Festival. Yes, they gave me press again. They let a guy like me in there. And I watched so many movies. So many that I don't want to waste any of your time. Here is my TIFF 2022 coverage. I woke up at 5 a.m. to catch my flight to Toronto, something I only mention because it definitely affected how I watched these first few screenings. After landing and settling myself into my Airbnb, I made my way over to my first screening of Broker. As a big fan of Koreeda and Song Kang-ho, this was easily one of my most anticipated films of the fest, and I'm thrilled to say not only did it live up to my expectations, it surpassed them. Koreeda really likes making movies about families, what it means to be a family, blah 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 blah. And even though this does feel like very familiar territory, Broker is maybe his most complex take on these themes. The film, while thrilling on the outside, tackles the story so gracefully and with such empathy. In a nutshell, it questions why family exists, what it means to be a family, which are questions every character in the film struggles with in their own unique ways. Because of how many different perspectives he's able to tackle under this one simple premise, you get probably his most nuanced take of this question that he's ever had, making it, in my opinion, maybe his best movie. Then I sprinted my ass over and watched One Fine Morning, directed by Mia Hansen-Løve. This is my first from her, and I gotta say, I love it. I really like this laid-back, melancholic French approach, and the relationships in this film, both between the daughter and father and the romantic ones, were just so vivid. I was very tired, and given the nature of this film's very watery tone, this was a bit of a hard one to watch, but all things considered, I really loved it. Day 2. After sleeping for a billion hours, I woke up pretty early for a press screening of The Inspection. This is Elegance Bratton's debut feature about a gay black man that joins the Marines for his mother's approval, and while just based off the premise, this seemed like it could be very by the books and predictable for a film about the Marines, it ended up being strangely fascinating. Jeremy Pope's performance alone was really hard to take your eyes off of. I mean, he carries this film. And for the most part, it is a very critical film about the US military that I thought was executed very well. I mean, the sound design in this film alone is pretty phenomenal. It's just the ending happens. And I won't spoil it, but it's a questionable choice that feels like it comes from a different film entirely. Part of me thinks this film is more clever than we're giving it credit for, and it really talks about how the US military manipulates you into thinking it's a family and that it's there for you. But at the same time, for how by the books the film is for most of the movie, it definitely just feels like it's trying to be like a happy ending to an unhappy story. Then I watched Prisoner's Daughter starring Brian Cox, and it sucked. Plain and simple. This is directed by Catherine Hardwicke, the director behind Twilight, which honestly, I know I say that like it's a bad thing, but it's kind of why I went to this movie. I had decent expectations going into it, and Brian Cox does a decent job, but the screenplay is just horrendous. One miss after another. Nothing but cliches. Really did not click with this in any way. I did not like this movie. Then I watched Weird, the Al Yankovic story. I was one of very few press people that was able to get into this because TIFF put this screening in the smallest theater possible. And apparently, because so many people weren't able to get into this, people were screaming and throwing things outside of the theater, which just, I gotta say, is hilarious considering it's the Al Yankovic story. The first 45 minutes of this movie is like the best comedy I've seen in years. It is perfect. The kind that didn't give me a second to breathe. I was laughing and smiling for basically 45 minutes straight, so much so that it hurt. And the last half just was not the same. It's not awful by any means. I mean, this whole thing feels like what The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent should have been. I think this is a great ode to Weird Al and his career. I mean, he wrote it, so I guess that kind of tracks. But it definitely feels like the more it shoots for absurdity, the more it feels like it's trying to be quirky, and the more it tries to do that, the less funny it is. But all that said, I still cannot recommend this enough. Get a group of friends together and watch it on the Roku channel, because apparently it's a Roku original, which is weird. Then I watched Bros, and I loved it. Can I just say, it feels amazing to see a blockbuster rom-com that is genuinely hilarious and romantic and rewatchable. It's just so much fun, and the humor is done so well that it just keeps being funny no matter how many times you rewatch it. I know a lot of people don't like Billy Eichner. Like maybe his humor's annoying to you, but in my opinion, I think he's hilarious. He keeps this film funny for its entire runtime, which makes it just the best kind of comfort watch. This is, again, seriously the only rom-com I've seen in recent years where I'm like, I would watch this anytime I'm in a bad mood. It is way too damn long. Like, 2 hours is not how long this film should be. PTSD, which is simply an occupational hazard of having Judd Apatow's name attached to it. But seriously, there's not a lot that I don't like about this film. I really enjoyed watching it, and I really want to watch it again, so you should go see it and have a laugh. Day 3. Then I watched Women Talking. Let me just say, the title does not lie. These women are talking up a storm in this film, and it is encapsulating right from the start. Right off the bat, the film clearly lays out who these characters are, what the situation is at hand, and where they stand apart from each other. And through these conversations and memories, the film explores the repercussions of abuse, the future, equality, you name it. And because of how much is being said and talked about in this film, it's very dense and one that I definitely want to watch again, just because I don't think I got all of what it was saying. Each character comes with their own tunnel of information and backstory and perspective, and it's just, you get such a rich film because of that. For now, I'll just say that this has some of the best performances and writing and editing that you'll see all year. It makes some editing choices that should not work at all, but just feels so smooth. For something that feels like it could only work as a stage play, this thing comes to life in film in ways that'll leave you in chills. Then I got a really bad hot dog and watched Susie Searches. This was okay. It's about this true crime podcaster who is trying to be a bigger true crime podcaster, so she does a certain thing to make it big. I won't spoil it because it's really fun finding out how things happen in the film while you're watching the film. I think my core issue with this film is that it felt like it was trying really hard to be like some weird Napoleon Dynamite type of world where everyone's kind of off and it just quirky for the sake of being quirky. But the weirdness was never that funny or interesting, in my opinion. It felt like a music video. A lot of the directorial choices and a lot of the editing was really creative and interesting. I thought I was watching a Lyrical Lemonade music video, not a movie. But once the mystery, which I won't spoil, starts to unfold, you really do start to have fun with it, which is funny because as the mystery takes over, the film is less concerned with trying to be quirky and more concerned with just telling a good story, and that's when it turns into a good film. I don't know. I'm excited to see what the director does next. I thought this was okay, but definitely did not need to try as hard as it did to be quirky. Then I watched the first 3 episodes of Documentary Season 4. There's not a ton to say about this experience other than Fred Armisen and the directors behind the series were there, and I got this fun little thing. It was very funny, as usual, and yeah, that is all I have to say about that. Day 4. As you'll come to learn, this was one of the craziest days of my life, and it started by watching Glass Onion, the new Knives Out mystery. I'm not gonna say jack shit about this one, because it's pretty much impossible to talk about this movie without giving something away. And I really do think the best way to go into this film is completely blind. Completely blind. As far as what I can say right now, I don't think this is a better film than the first one. I think that one's a lot smoother and a lot tighter with its storytelling, but I do think this is a lot better as a whodunit mystery than the first one. It's a lot more ambitious. The twists and turns are a lot more satisfying. It does a lot of things that I don't think a lot of people are gonna like. It might rub a lot of people the wrong way. I think it gets away with these things. I think it's a very funny movie. It's the most fun I had at this festival, and it should be getting a theatrical release, because what the hell. Now, if you recall from my last TIFF video, that year I had to leave Knives Out early to catch a screening of The Lighthouse, a film that at the time I had already seen. It was one of the most embarrassing things I've ever done, and I told myself I would never let this happen again, and it almost happened again. I had a screening of The Fabelmans that started about 10 minutes after Glass Onion was scheduled to get out, which is to say, as soon as Glass Onion showed up on the screen at the end of this movie, me and 30 other people booked it out of the theater. I saw guys in suits, sweating, crying, panting. We left the theater. Volunteers were like, "It's that way." People were pushing each other out of the way. I get to the theater. Steven Spielberg is just giving a speech on stage. I nearly start crying because that's my childhood hero right there. I sit down. I have a terrible seat, and then I watched The Fabelmans. This is a film about Steven Spielberg's childhood, his parents' divorce, and his love for filmmaking. It's basically his memoir. And on paper, that may sound like, I don't know, Belfast, Roma, Empire of Light, and nothing against some of those movies, but this is just way more than just another movie about a director's childhood. It's more than just a love letter to movies. It's a love letter to passion, which sounds cheesy, but the movie's cheesy, so we're just gonna have to be cheesy here. It's about how uncontrollable love is, whether it be love for the craft or love for another person. Powerful forces that will pull you in the direction of that love no matter how hard you try to avoid it. Places we find control in uncontrollable environments. Again, very cheesy stuff, very overly sentimental, and definitely the most Oscar bait thing I saw at the festival. It's also the most moved I felt the whole time. If this is Spielberg's last film, it is the perfect note to end on, specifically that last shot, which I definitely won't say anything more about. I just cannot wait to watch this thing again. Everything about it really worked for me. I'm gonna get clowned on for this, but I loved this movie. After that, about 2 hours before the world premiere of The Whale, I was informed that I could get a ticket to the world premiere of The Whale. Thank you so much, Amanda the Jedi and YMS, for making this happen for me, which was crazy as is. But then I get into The Whale, and I'm ordering a bottle of water, and then Finn Wolfhard walks in. And at first I'm just like, oh, that's cool, Finn Wolfhard. And then he looks at me, and he smiles, and then he waves, and I'm like, you don't think. And I go over to him, and he tells me he watches my videos. And this is one of the most surreal things that's ever happened to me, and Finn, if you're watching this, it was great meeting you. and then I watched The Whale. On top of all of that, let me just say off the bat, Brendan Fraser's performance is better than you think it's going to be, and is absolutely more than just a comeback performance. It's one of the best performances I've seen all year. Powerful and empathetic and brave and risky and interesting and real. It unlocks something that grips you the first moment you see him. That said, it's hands down the best part about the film, because the film itself fell just a little flat for me. I still really liked it. I think it's really powerful and very dark. It's one of the hardest films I've had to watch at the fest. And I think it's one of those that could be extremely reaffirming and just like come at the right time depending on where you are at in life. But to me, at least, on this watch, I couldn't really feel much past what was on the surface of it. I learned so much about this character and the people around him and about his past, but never do I feel like I'm actually connecting to any of it. It just feels like the film is explaining to me what has happened. And a lot of what I am connecting to is how Brendan Fraser's reacting throughout the film. I mean, again, it's a hard performance not to feel, which I'm obviously going to give some credit to the film for that. Someone had to direct him, and the film did that. I like Aronofsky as a filmmaker, but sometimes he does these things where it's just frustratingly surface level for how dramatic and deep the film is trying to be. It just did not move me in the way I think the film wanted me to, or the way I wanted it to, at least until the last 10 minutes, which are insane. And day 5, this day I decided to sleep in because I had slept maybe like 6 hours total this whole trip up until then, and I watched The Eternal Daughter, the latest from Joanna Hogg, the director of The Souvenir. Watching her films, you can really tell just how vulnerable they are. Her process and her experience is all completely on the screen, and when you make something that honest, you're gonna get to some universal truth in the subtleties of your filmmaking. Textures in this film, some of the way Tilda Swinton is acting, the ghostly elements. It's a really haunting movie about how we see each other in our parents, and I don't know if it's necessarily the easiest thing to recommend just because of how ambiguous a lot of the storytelling is, but man, if you're connecting with it, it really hits you. Then I watched Sanctuary. This is a movie starring Margaret Qualley and Christopher Abbott about a very wealthy man and a dominatrix, and I actually don't want to say anything more. Watching this unfold and kind of seeing what their relationship to one another is makes this a very thrilling watch. Every twist and turn the film takes is both very real and so unexpected. It's both hilarious and kind of thrilling. Both actors deliver amazing performances, which they should, considering this is just 2 people in one room for basically a whole movie. It does keep you extremely invested for its simple setup. I do wish there was a bit more to it, that being said, but this is like the dictionary definition of I can't wait to see what this director does next, because goddamn does he clearly know what he's doing. Then I watched the Toronto premiere of Decision to Leave, my favorite film of the festival and maybe of this year. This is a romantic police procedural directed by Park Chan-wook, and do I need to say anything else? Once again, not something I want to talk about outside the synopsis, because it really is such an experience to watch this story unfold. I feel like I've said this about every film in this video. What I will say is that it's one of the most romantic things I've ever seen. It has the most playful and exciting direction of anything this year, and it is just a whole lot of fun. It is a lot less serious than a lot of his previous efforts, which really worked for me. I honestly just wish every movie was like this. And then it was my final day, day 6, and I watched The Banshees of, this is the latest from Martin McDonagh, and I loved it. And I'm realizing it's kind of the only film of his that I love. All of his films have been really gripping, but there's always been something that keeps them from being amazing. This one is a lot more mature in its subject matter than In Bruges. It's a lot warmer than something like Three Billboards. It is also easily the funniest thing he's ever made, and a lot of that is thanks to Barry Keoghan's phenomenal performance. Nobody's talking about that performance, and it's seriously incredible, but it kind of makes sense because Colin Farrell steals the show. His performance is both heart-wrenching and hilarious. The film doesn't have like this high-stakes crime element that his other films really rely on, which is to say the film manages to make a very simple premise of just these two friends. In that, it ends up being one of his most exciting films and the only one that's actually felt like it touched me in some way. Then I finished the festival with Pearl. I do not think this film is intended to be viewed with an audience of old press people at 12 in the afternoon in an IMAX theater, but that's how I watched it. I'm not even the craziest fan of X, the I guess sequel to this film, but I do think that was a lot better in my opinion. I don't think the slasher elements of Pearl are all that exciting. I don't think the character of Pearl is bringing anything new to this very tired type of horror protagonist. The film has an interesting atmosphere to it, and I like the cinematography. It makes a few bold choices here and there, like having the longest monologue I've ever seen. For the most part, there wasn't a lot about this that clicked with me, and it could be my screening, or it could be that it's just a boring kind of horror movie at this point. And that was my TIFF experience. I do want to say thank you to everyone who said hello and took a picture. There were a lot of you. I'm not just here to toot my own horn, but it was crazy, and it really made the fest for me. It was so special getting to meet so many of you, and hopefully I get to see you guys again. And you know what? I think I'm gonna leave. So thanks for watching. Go check all these films and form your own opinion when you can, and before you head out. I want to thank this week's sponsor, Squarespace. Now, Squarespace, if you didn't already know, is a place where you can go online to build your brand, whether that be an online store, a blog, a portfolio, you name it. They have award-winning designer templates where you can create galleries for your work, as well as password-protected pages for clients. Me, personally, I'm a big fan of their video block feature, which allows me to showcase some of my favorite videos and films in a way that looks really nice and matches my style. Plus, they have a built-in mobile web designer, which makes it so that whatever website you create will look amazing no matter what platform it's on, while once again still matching your style. But the best part about it all is that if you go to squarespace.com/Karsten, you can get 10% off of your first purchase. So seriously, there's no reason not to give it a shot. So thanks again to Squarespace for sponsoring this video. Thanks for watching this video. You know what? I think I'm going to see you in the next one.